Network switching technologies are as old as time. So let's go back in history to understand the plain old telephone service POTS, also known as the Public Switch Telephone Network PSTN, which was the traditional analog voice transmission phone system using copper wires, and a technology known as circuit switching, which was originally developed to manage telephone calls over these public switch telephone networks by creating a dedicated physical pathway or channel between the two communicating parties. Once the call was established, the links between the two parties remained the same throughout the conversation, which provides the benefits of fixed or known transmission times, a uniform level of quality, and little or no loss of signal or communication interruptions. But this could also result in a lot of dead bandwidth if the channel's full capacity was not utilized correctly. Also, at the end of communications, these channels were closed and then re-established on a new communication when needed, again being very bandwidth expensive and taxing. For this reason, there is very little actual circuit switching in the modern world, with the exceptions being some legacy systems. However, for the most part, many of these traditional landline technologies, such as POTS, PSTN, and ISDN networks, are being phased out globally. Please refer to my previous videos on the digital switchover, linked now. So, as the years passed by, computer communications increased as opposed to the traditional voice communications, so a new form of switching was needed. This new form of switching technology formed the foundations of the early internet, and this technology was known as packet switching, which was done through a modem which allowed the transmission of Internet Protocol IP data packets across the traditional phone lines. These early modems were revolutionary technologies in those days, which allowed home computers to connect to the modem, which then connected to your traditional phone line socket, which then transmitted over the public network across to another computer using the same phone line system. But how did this work exactly? As those old school phones used analog signals, whereas the computers used more modern digital signals. But ultimately, the landline phone lines used analog signals, so a form of conversion had to occur, and this was the beauty of the modem. If anyone was around at the time of dial up internet, you will appreciate the beauty of this revolutionary technology, which would pave the way to eventually phase off the use of public switch telephone networks and more towards a cable or digital based technology using the use of switches and routers across the world rather than copper phone lines. Note, there was an ISDN network that was created before this concept, which ultimately failed and is going to be phased out as part of the digital switchover, as packet switching is ultimately the future and has so many benefits compared to the previous telephone networks. And the efficiency is superb. There is no wasted bandwidth, and there is many options to transmit packets using the nearest and fastest route possible without having to create a dedicated channel or circuit just for a communication. Bonus CISSP exam tip and history tip. The original research on packet switch networks was not conducted to create a global internet per se, but rather a way to connect research labs and communications between the US Defense Advanced Research Projects. I would recommend Googling the ARPANET network. But ultimately, this concept was so fundamental that it became the modern day internet anyway. And to further conceptualize this concept, these old school modems essentially became modern day routers as we know today, and still use the same concept of packet switching networking. Now, inside packet switching, you can have the concept of virtual circuits, also called a communication path, of which there are two types of virtual circuits. The first being permanent virtual circuits, PVCs, which work like those dedicated leased telephone lines because old is gold, right? So we virtualize that old concept into permanent virtual circuits. And the second type of virtual circuit is known as switched virtual circuits, SVCs, which work like packet switch networks, where the communication path is not dedicated but uses the best path available, hitting multiple network switches en route. A bonus CISSP exam tip. You may hear the term quality of service, QoS, which is where packet switch networks may use QoS to give specific network traffic precedence over other types of traffic. Specifically, voice over IP, VoIP, traffic, which is always prioritized given that you don't want interruptions of phone call communications. On the topic of voice over IP, let's dive into how this technology works, which is the most modern today and is likely the future of the digital switchover. So, to explain this concept, let's illustrate the entire history of what we've learned so far and how voice over IP fits into all of this. You see, back in the 1960s, the original VoIP technology was actually PBX, Private Branch Exchange, which was a telephony service which allowed you to make and receive calls within a company, aka employees using the PSTN network of their employer, which had numerous technology and financial benefits, but ultimately allowed employees to make telephone calls through their employer's PBX system, either internally on site or even in some cases externally by connecting into the PBX voice router, a bit like an old school VPN in those days. And this old school PBX eventually became voice over IP gateways, and those old school modems became modern day routers. And this is how voice over IP works today. But the difference is also in the phones, which now are voice over IP phones, aka digital rather than analog, meaning they can use the protocol known as Session Initiation Protocol, SIP. And all this is important because as the POTS, PSTN, and ISDN lines are phased out, this will eventually replace those old school phone lines as the future way of voice communications over the internet, aka packet switching. In summary, once voice over IP becomes mainstream and the primary source of voice communications, this will indicate an end of an analog era. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you would like to see more content like this, it would be super fantastic if you could leave a like and subscribe to help support this channel's growth.